Hello everyone. Good evening and welcome. This is Ramola D from Ramola D Reports. Welcome to this very special evening edition. I'm here today with Chief Daymond Jones, a very special guest, somebody we're going to be speaking with on a variety of subjects. Many people may know that Chief Daymond Jones was on Derek Robinson's call a little while ago on PAX International, just a couple of days ago. And so I'm very honored and privileged that he's joining me here tonight. Um, Let me introduce him a little bit while I mute that so I don't hear myself talking to myself. I think I have it. Okay. So, Chief Daymond Jones has a very illustrious police career. He is a retired police chief. He started his law enforcement career in 1978 in Dallas, Texas, as a police cadet. He retired as a chief in Florida in the towns of Alta and Midway. Also, as Chief Deputy Constable in Alabama in the County Office of Constable in Alabama. He has had a 40-year career. That was in Coffee County. And he is also an ordained minister of the Sovereign Church of Jesus.com, which is located in Alabama, New Jersey, and Texas. And he also has two other ministries because a long time ago when he was working with his associate minister, who had his own ministry called Speaking the Truth Ministry, he inherited that ministry from his friend, and that is also an overseas cyber ministry, which is connected also with a ministry in the northern area of India. So that's really interesting. And these days, I think Brother Daymond is going to tell us what exactly he does these days, but he did tell me that one of the things he does is he audits and makes sure that the police in his region are being good cops. And so he works on filming, videotaping, and reminding them of their constitutional rights and things that they should be doing according to the Constitution. So welcome, Chief Daymond. Thanks so much for joining me this evening.
Thank you for having me.
As you know, I've told you many times, I was blown away, just like many others, listening to the conversation you had with Derek Robinson a couple nights ago and hearing all of the wonderful things you were talking about, and also the not so wonderful things that, unfortunately, many of us are looking at today, the issues of surveillance today, the issues of non-judicial, extrajudicial targeting today, the state of affairs in the US today, the state of our freedoms and liberties in the US today, and, sort of looking at that landscape and trying to understand it. So I wanted to actually look at some of the things you had talked about that night and perhaps start there, if you don't mind, and
Yes,
ask you to perhaps, extend a little bit what you had talked about. One of the things that strikes me is since you've had such a very long police career and across a couple states, you would probably be in a position to tell us what you think, your experience really, of what you've seen changing across time in terms of the place of police in our communities and our society today. How have the police changed? With all of the militarizing of police that started happening in the 90s and continued through the 2000s and, continues right now, what kind of changes have you witnessed? And also the place that the federal agencies, the FBI and other federal agencies, to what extent were they a part of local county police actions earlier? And now what is, the change? What's the difference like?
thank you. I'll try and go through a little timeline, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
In '78, of course, I was in the ninth grade, so I'm in ROTC in doing leadership development,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a cadet with the police department. So I'm in a uniform all the time. My dad had come out of the Marine Corps. He had been in law enforcement, and part of it was kind of following in dad's footsteps. Even though he told me more than once, he said, you might ought to think about a different career. These things are hard, these things are difficult, and they're never going to get any easier.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, he said, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So he said, if you do grow up and you do become a policeman, you're
Mm-hmm.
taking one slot away from a possible bad guy, a man that would be a bad policeman. Because if you're in there, you're a man of faith, a man of honor, and you'll do it. And that keeps a bad guy from getting it. So you have to get more guys like you to fill all the slots. So we're in a good position. And that was the thought of a lot of men in my time growing up in my area in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
The police were what a lot of people call a man's man. They were manly, they were outdoors, they took care of their wives and their children, their mothers. They were born, raised, and bred to take care of the women folk around them, just like I was. Uh, somebody'd have to kill you to get to your women folk or your family. So
Mm-hmm.
these were, they morally and ethically were in a good place. Now, there was always a bad apple in the barrel, and the good cops at that time routinely belly ached, complained, made known to their supervisors. Uh, if this guy calls for backup, we're going to show up, but he's a dirty bird or a bad egg,
Mm-hmm.
or other terms that would say, we need a close eye on him. And they would try and close him out, squeeze him out, because Dallas had a civil service exam, so you were civil servant employees. So it wasn't that you couldn't be fired, it wasn't you couldn't be suspended, but because at one time, if they didn't like a policeman, they just fire him. So that had happened too much, so they come up with this civil service. So there's a procedure and a process.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get complaints, they might be able to suspend you, but you have to get paid while it's investigated. And then even if they fire you, if the Civil Service Board agrees that you shouldn't be fired, they have to put you back on the street and back pay you all your money. So it was not as easy as it was in all the departments around, because they were the only one that had that I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
So the police were good anyway, but the bad ones, it just took time to get them out, but they were working on it. And the police were real localized. If you worked in Dallas, that's where you worked.
Mm-hmm. And the people knew you in your community. You became known in your community.
Yes, it was, Dallas at that time, I'm wanting to say we had 600,000 or 700,000 people. I can't remember, I don't know for positive, but it was less than a million, where now it's a million or million one, million two. But I think we were 750,000, somewhere around there. I'd be corrected if
Okay.
I'm wrong. But the point was, it's very large. And I don't know how many square miles, but I'd figured Dallas is 200 or 300 square miles or bigger. I'd have to look back.
Right,
The
right.
point is, it's a large geographic area.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of demographics, men, women, people from various countries.
Mm-hmm.
It had not a large, but a healthy Hispanic Latino population. It
Mm-hmm.
had a probably a 10 or 12% black or African American uh, uh, situation, as it's commonly known. I hate to hyphenate because it makes it sound like you're not in the groove. You're
Mm-hmm.
either American or you're not. But
Right, right.
anyway, I'm just saying it for people so they have understanding. So they have all these demographics. They have a lot of religion. Mainly it's Christian, but Buddhist, Taoist, uh, oh shoot, the Jewish,
Hindu, Muslim,
yes, Muslims, yes.
Jewish. Yeah.
At that particular time,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I didn't know what a Muslim was, other than it was just another religion. I didn't have no understanding, and
Right.
I think most police didn't. But anyway, they were all these different religions. So without having specific training in cultural diversity, we were relied upon to be good men of conscience, good men of honor. So if
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you and you got some kind of foreign religion or you don't speak English very well, I'm going to do the best I can to find out if you're a victim and help you. Or if you're in need, you're not a victim, but you're in need of assistance. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and find out, assess and make sure you're no threat to me or people around me or the area. I'm sizing you up. And, the
Mm-hmm.
longer I talk and size you up and watch your body movements, I learn, okay, chances are she's good. We go a little deeper. And I try and find out a little background. It's a little 5 or 10 minute chit chat. And then I'm into, well, what exactly would you like me to do? And then they tell me, and I say, okay, we can do that or we can't do that, but here's what we can do. And if we can't, here's some phone numbers and here's people that will be able to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And tell them, give them our names and say, these officers were here. We'll write a
Mm-hmm.
case number on it. So they'll know that we've already checked you out and we don't find no problems and you just go on. That was the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
In about 85 or 86, so we're talking 7 or 8 years later, I
Mm-hmm.
began to notice some movement in the way police were acting, as in I was seeing police unions
Mm-hmm.
beginning to get a lot stronger. And they were trying to get laws passed in the legislature to say police have certain rights. So these were rights above everybody else's rights. And when I say that, it's true and it's not true. Let me say it this way. If I'm your sergeant and you're an officer and I come in there and say what happened, but by virtue of you being my employee, you have to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you have a Fifth Amendment right not to incriminate yourself because something you might tell me as your sergeant or chief that you saw or you was here could actually incriminate you. But your job requires you to tell, or I can fire you for being a subordinate. So you get into a limo situation. So to a point, they had to create some laws that created a process where police could be shielded to a point and
Right.
and
Right.
still be made to tell what they knew. But if
Mm-hmm.
they come to a certain really tight area,
Mm-hmm.
very focused area, then they can say, I'm going to invoke. So then the union representative would come in, which would actually be with an attorney, and say, hey, uh, we're going to talk to the officer and we're going to break it down for you. We're going to put him at arm's length from you, so to speak.
I see.
So you go into a room, the attorney would say, okay, you're on privileged communication, attorney client. So go ahead and tell me what happened. I can't never talk about it. Tell me what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to trust the attorney. I mean, that was the law, but attorneys could go bad like cops and they could reveal what you said. So you'd have to make up your mind, if you had a good attorney uh, and he was trustworthy. So you'd say, here's how it really went down. Here's the whole story. So basically, they'd say, well, there's nothing that there's something that they could twist and torque into being a violation or a policy violation, but they'd really have to go the extra mile to get it.
Hmm.
Okay. So, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell your supervisors that we're going to give a prepared statement by you. So we're going to word it and craft it where those possibilities don't exist. Because if they get you in there and they start questioning you, then
Mm-hmm.
you get flustered and you misspeak yourself. They'll say, was you lying a while ago or are you lying now? And said, then you'll panic. And they'll
Mm-hmm.
say, listen, just confess or you're going to prison. So to a point, it was good for them to make some laws like this.
Yeah.
But while they were doing that, they were also starting to make laws that gave them more strength. And then they used that to turn around and make laws that benefited the police, not the public.
That's what I was going to ask about. To what extent did these kinds of changes where police unions began to become very protectionist toward the police, to what extent did that benefit the community? And you're saying that there was a fine line and sometimes it got crossed, right?
I think until somewhere around, I think it didn't, the very first kickoff I ever remember was probably late 82, early 83. And by 85 or 86, it was getting kind of a toehold, so to speak, to where police, some of the police that I was working with, which I was, you know, now I'm a man, I'm an adult,
Mm-hmm.
and I've grown and I've worked with these guys. Well, I left the police cadets when I left high school, but actually I left before that, but I'd still go down and ride so much they still considered me the same guy. I just wasn't wearing a uniform. I'd go in
Mm-hmm.
dress clothes, doing the same thing. Essentially, I just volunteering. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, some of them would tell me, especially the older ones that had been in since the late 50s, the early 60s, they
Mm-hmm.
say, these unions are changing things up. So it's supposed to be to benefit us because they can negotiate a contract where if a police officer at that time was getting 16,000 coming in the door, said
Mm-hmm.
they're bargaining for 17 or 17.5, which pushes everybody up the line. And there are some protections for us that we didn't have. We have civil service,
Mm-hmm.
but on the day-to-day operations, things need to change for our safety. And said, so we're good with all that, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not good with them changing the laws that they think will help us out, that helps them out,
Mm-hmm.
that gets the city to pay our dues that the taxpayers paying instead of us paying out of our own pocket. They're
Mm-hmm.
trying to pump up our retirement. Well, good for us. However, who has to pay the bill? The citizens. So we want to get a fair paycheck. We want to get fair benefits. And obviously, if somebody else is giving more benefits, we're going to leave here and go there. So they have to be competitive. Still not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, our motto's always been, that's like us, especially ladies. There was men too, but especially ladies that say, why ain't you doing nothing? They'd get very emotional. And
Mm-hmm.
the officers had this line, we don't make the law, we just enforce the law. They
Mm-hmm.
says, but now that the unions on quote on our behalf, which we don't all agree with, not even half of us agree with it, they're going in and lobbying full time all year round the legislature to make certain laws to
Mm-hmm.
give us extra powers
Mm-hmm. So, in
to
a sense, that's kind of that distinction between the executive and the judiciary is kind of breaking down over there, right? Because law enforcement is not supposed to lobby, but you're saying that they started to lobby, and now it's become a thing. I understand that the police unions and police associations, in fact, right, like
get
law offices, alumni associations, end up becoming the lobbying factors with legislatures.
right. Here's the thing. Anybody can belong to any union or association they want to. That's their God given right. That association can go do things so long as it's legal. Now, a lot of things are unethical, in my opinion, having dealt with them. Some ain't, some are. Uh, you put 10 people over here, probably one of them's going to have a little something different about that man or woman. It's just statistics. But they are now making the law and enforcing the law. And they're getting the legislature to give legislative intent. So in the time that not only do they make the law, they're getting them to give the intent, and it's in favor of the officers instead of in favor of the citizen. Citizens always got the benefit of the doubt. Okay. Now I tell people sometimes I say, would be better in 1960 overall.
Mm-hmm.
They said, well, we didn't have the civil rights, this, that, and other. I said overall. Now we can get into a very minute niche, okay? I don't want to go there because that's not what we're talking about, but I just 30 seconds to say people knew their neighbors. People were civil. It was a simpler time and simpler thought process. And there was a lot more of good or bad people just put it out there and said, this is how it is. We
Mm-hmm.
wasn't politically correct. Police wasn't making laws, they were only enforcing laws. And at that particular time, if you had, quote, a gun crime, as in you had done something with a gun, you had to go to jail or prison. When you got out, you paid your debt, just like if you stole a car or stole some money, you paid your debt.
Mm-hmm.
And in 64, they fixed it where if you went to prison, you could never own or possess a firearm again. Well, how are you supposed to defend your family and your house? And you already paid your debt, but you're still paying your debt forever. I said,
Mm-hmm.
so I said, when John F. Kennedy was president, I said, he was the last great president we had in lots of ways, and people can argue, but I've done a lot of research on that man. And I used to go to the school book depository before it was ever a museum,
Oh,
but that's
wow.
another, but that's another story too.
Yes, absolutely.
But I said, the point is,
Mm-hmm.
police did wrongly extract confessions out of people prior to Miranda versus Arizona, the Miranda warning. I know that happened. Uh, but for the most part, all the people I knew and knew officers back then said it did happen. You always had bad cops, bully cops, but they didn't use it a lot. Okay. I wasn't there. I can't tell you specifically, but I have reason to believe it's true. But when they abused it, it was real bad.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, overall, we were a lot better in a lot of ways. And I said, now you got these paid unions that the citizens are paying for them to administer this contract, plus your the officers are getting the city to pay their dues. So the citizens are paying for this whole thing, and they're lobbying arm. They're
Mm-hmm.
lobbying. They lobby for you locally, they lobby for you on the state, they lobby for you nationally, and the taxpayers are paying for lobbyists. In essence,
Yeah, yeah.
they,
So things have changed to that extent, and that is quite concerning. And I think a lot of people don't really know about it. But this is kind of expressed in the way the police conducts themselves in communities. The changes are reflected in the ways in which the police perceive of themselves. Whether they perceive of themselves as peace officers, as good cops who are working with communities, or as highly entitled and privileged people. And of course, this is why I wanted to talk about this, because now we are in the post-Patriot Act era. And I hope we're in the post Patriot Act era. Really, I'm hoping that will come to an end very soon. But things have changed. Cops appear to have a different vision of themselves. So, can you address that a little bit? How that has changed?
well, when I started, I was a cadet, but had I been of age at that particular day, then I would have been a sworn peace officer. Now think
Mm-hmm.
about the title, peace officer.
Mm-hmm.
You're an officer of the peace. Okay. Uh, in Texas, in fact, in their constitution, a uh, a peace officer, a constitutional peace officer, is the elected constable, the elected sheriff, the coroner,
Mm-hmm.
and the Texas Rangers. They
Okay.
are in the actual Constitution of 1845. Okay,
Wow.
when it became a state. Now
Mm-hmm.
they are constitutional. That means that the people, all of Texas, come together directly and indirectly and said, "We, the people, are creating this Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
These are our constitutional peace officers. So these are the ones that people agreed on. All the other police are legislative police. So they said cities could, at that time, they didn't incorporate, they got a charter.
Mm-hmm.
That like it'd be a hundred of them in a county or a city or something. They would lobby the legislature to create the city of. Uh, and back in them times, it didn't even say like City of Love; it's a Love City because
Mm-hmm.
that, when it says city of means representation than actually being. It gets into a legal concept. I don't want to belabor that.
Oh, I see.
Huh?
I'm just,
Oh, oh,
listening. Yeah.
it just has different connotations. Meaning, are you a man or are you of men?
I
I mean,
see.
you the real thing, or are you a part of something that's the real thing? And it
Mm-hmm.
gets into a lot of legal theories and concepts. I better leave that alone. But the point is they was not incorporated. They was not a company. They were not a corporation. They were a public entity. They were a public servant entity. Okay.
Right.
And so you had real peace officers. Well, these cities, they said, well, we're going to make local legislation. We're going to make a local ordinance and we're going to create our own police department. And when they did that, they were taking care of basically local ordinances like wild animals, people that were letting their sewer run out into the street. They were, you know, they were to keep the peace. So say if people was arguing, getting loud, they were not necessarily taken to jail, just break them up and let them go their own way. You was to bring peace and tranquility to the community. And so that's what they were and that's what they stayed.
Is that the situation right now? So basically
No.
the police, no, it's not.
No. At that time in 85, 86, I started hearing, but that was the first time I ever heard it referring to law enforcement.
Okay.
And you couldn't find it nowhere actually in the law books, and you couldn't find it nowhere in the statutes. It was just a term. And I'd ask people, why are you saying that? Well, that covers the sheriff, the constable, the marshal, the rangers, highway patrol. When you say law enforcement, it's all gamut. It's everything where you wear a badge, carry a gun, and you have the authority to arrest. You're in law enforcement. I said, okay, but it just don't sound good. It doesn't sound right. It sounds robotic. It sounds like something other than what we are. We're peace officers. So, some of that stuff I was beginning to know, but didn't know, and more and more I began to know. And then around the early 90s, when Bill Clinton went in, then he started trying to militarize police departments, not just a few, all of them. And he was doing a strings attachment, meaning you had certain duties, accountabilities, responsibilities to the government for these tanks.
I see.
Tanks.
Wow.
Like
MRAPs. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Fully automatic machine guns, bulletproof and riot gear.
I mean, did police even want those things?
At that particular time, I'd say 10% yeah, 90% no. But you always had like some sheriff in a small rural county, or you'd have some chief of police, or sometimes two or three of the chiefs would know each other's sheriffs, and they'd be, nobody cares about us, woe is us. And then the government comes along and they say, well, we got some big toys for you boys. And they couldn't resist the fireworks. And they would, in essence, they wasn't looking at it like this, but they were selling the people out and militarizing. So
and this was the 1033 program, right? Military equipment being sort of handed down as it aged out or whatever in the military?
Yes, but it's also other things. When I say that, boy, my phone just rings off the hook. Anyway, yes, I had forgot about that, but yes, that's correct. But
there is another part to it, I know, and that's something I'm very, very interested about. And that is, it was during Clinton's time, of course, Janet Reno, Attorney General at the time. She signed this memorandum of understanding for the Department of Justice with the DOD. And the Secretary of Defense at the time was John Dutch, and they signed an understanding to bring advanced technologies to police departments and also to the military, to have the military and police departments work together, military operations other than war. So my question there would be, how did that play out? Because we're talking about different kinds of advanced technologies here, non-lethal weapons, laser, electromagnetic, microwave weapons. How did that play out? What kind of weapons came to the police departments at that time, etc.?
Well, let me tell you, for example, there was a computer program, but a man that I knew actually developed it. It was called Code 3. Well, in certain places, if you say Code 3, that means you're running your lights and siren going to, a felonious crime. It's serious, a robbery, murder, something. So they decided they'd call this system Code 3. Now, it was basically an advanced record keeping system, so that, say, if today I stop you and say you run a stop sign, and say I wrote you a warning and just said, hey, nice lady, please don't do this anymore. We don't I don't like writing tickets, and I don't need your money. The city don't need your money. You need it. So let's just give you a warning. You be a nice lady and just don't do it no more. And you say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it tells when and where and all that stuff that goes in there. But say 3 weeks later, you run a stop sign somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And that policeman stops you and says, hey, you were stopped here local. So it was a local program, so you could do anything you wanted to with it. Said, so we just stopped you here 2 weeks ago for a stop sign up the road. So you're not learning, so I'm going to have to write you a ticket. Okay, that was the auspices.
Okay.
But it also started getting other information like, where do you work? Well, we don't have no reason need to know where you work.
Mm-hmm.
If you're married or single, those are not relevant government questions. I mean, in a specific investigation, yes, but in minor incidents and traffic and ordinance things, that's way out of line. But they were starting to ask questions like that to put in this system. Then some of these local departments were sharing their Code 3. So now, if you was in a city 15 miles down the road and you was doing stuff over there, and you come over here occasionally, well, now my machine's hooked up to their machine, hooked up to theirs. So now we got 6 or 8 people pretty close by. So now instead of being able to keep up with a population of 5 or 8,000, now we keep up with a population of 40,000.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're sharing it, but there come to be misuse and people wanting to look somebody up. And me actually seeing an officer go in, for example, and I'd heard numerous times about this, because this wasn't like FCIC, NCIC, Florida Criminal Information Center, National Criminal Information Center, where they can type in your information and get a lot of basics about you off of a driver's license or your tag. But it only has pertinent raw data information, nothing big. Well, these here were expanded programs. So now I can go get your phone number. I can find out exactly where you live. I know if you're married, if you got children. I know where you work. I even know pretty much how much money you make. I know if you own any cars. I know all this stuff. So guess what? Now, if I want to come call on you and be your new boyfriend, I got all that information. On the other hand, if I don't like you, I know where you are and all your information to help sink you, right? Yeah. So the information could be used for good or bad. But they were getting way too much information that they didn't need. And it wasn't long after that people, private third-party companies was trying to buy this information from these governments.
Wait, from these local police stations?
Yes.
Local police databases.
Yes, because there wasn't a law that prohibited.
Wow.
So say if I'm in a small department and we got 15 officers, right? And say we got a $1 million or $1,001 budget for the entire year for everything we could do. And then, I really want to hire a couple more officers because I said, we're starting to grow. And sometimes with vacation and officers off or having to go to court and testify, occasionally I'm coming up short. So I really need another couple officers. Well, ABC Data Company says, well, not just yours, but because your system has ability to get everything from the entire county. So we're not just coming for your 10,000 people. We want the whole county's thing, but your system can download it. We'll send somebody to you and we'll pay you $50,000 for it. Guess what? Now I can hire that other officer.
Wow.
Or buy another couple cars, right? And so they're gonna write it, but then I'm gonna tell them, hey, make this check not to me, okay? That's illegal. Plus it's stupid and wrong. But make it to the city, but tell them, that you're buying police data information. You don't have to go into no details. They don't need to know. They
I
wouldn't like it.
see. I
So
see.
just tell them you want to buy this public information, and it is public per se, but all that other intel isn't, and it all comes as a package. So if I'm a
Well,
car
actually,
dealership,
it's public in the sense that it's private information that the police has collected. So
that's correct.
it pertains to private citizens in that city or county or locale. And
Mhm.
and then the police taking that and sort of claiming it as
Right.
laying ownership to it, claiming it as owned by police, and then sellable. That reeks of corruption, I would say,
Right.
right?
So yeah, I mean it certainly isn't to me, it might not, certain parts depend on exactly what happened, could be illegal or could not, depend on specifics.
I see.
However, it's always unethical. But Florida wasn't big on ethics at that time. They are now, but they wasn't then. And they let a lot of things slide. But anyway, say if I said, you must tell them that this information you're buying, quote, under public information as a third party, that your deal with the law enforcement administration, which means me, but it sounds like it ain't me, agrees to do this deal if it goes in straight to police operations. It's discretionary. So I get to hire people or buy guns or do what I want to, and I got now $50,000. I can go wild on a shopping spree or hire another officer.
So basically, this could be a private company that through the city would be giving certain police officers that money.
Yeah, they would hire them. They'd hire them just like another officer on the street because hypothetically, let's say I never did it, but I know people that did. Say if say if this guy shows up in my office and says, I'm with so and so technologies and we want to buy your information, we know about your code 3 system. Okay, great. Fine. I give him just a little bit of basic raw information. He says, okay. He says, well, just pick somebody random and just pull something up and let me just see what kind of information you collect, see how worthwhile it is to. He looks at it and his eyes are that big. Oh my God, we've hit the data mine. This is the
Mm-hmm.
mother lode. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, how many more people have this? Is this the only city or county around here with this? Well, who else has it? You know? And so they turn them on to about 400 agencies across the United States that have these. So the man that developed it, he gets $100,000 gift, gift, and all they want is a piece of paper that names the police departments that have it. That's it.
This is actually huge. I think we should pause right here and I should get a real sense of what's going on over here. Who gets this information? What are the kinds of companies that ask for this kind of information? And what is the connection with technology there?
Okay, well, it could be everything from you got a local car dealership and they're targeting people that have an individual or a combined income of 35,000 a year or more. So everybody that makes less than that gets no mail. They're gonna send
Oh,
postcards.
okay. So this is more like marketing lists. So they're getting marketing data from you guys.
Right, but it 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 could be just marketing, but then so whether it's an insurance company,
Mm-hmm.
private investigation firms that want to gather intelligence in the area for private investigations. I'm trying to think of other
Could it
things.
be federal agencies?
Well, federal agencies could get it. They would just ask and it'd just be given to them.
Oh, I see. Okay. So they don't really have to go this roundabout route. They don't need to pay you for it. They would just get the info.
Yeah, basically, uh, let me say it this way. At I'm going to guess 50% of the police departments, if somebody shows up that's a legitimate FBI agent, has their credentials, you call, you verify, you know it's the guy, and he says, I want ABC files. They just pull them up, copy them, and give them to them. That's
I
the
see.
end of it. He doesn't have to say, I'm conducting this investigation or why he needs it. They just get along and they just do it.
I see. They don't even
And
need to give an explanation as to why they need it.
prior to 1985, I didn't see that very much.
Okay.
It's like,
Has
you
has
know,
that changed?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. So agencies were more isolated and insulated,
Right,
and they
right.
dealt with their local communities.
Mm-hmm.
And so in your community, if maybe hypothetically you got a liquor law and it says at 2 o'clock in the morning you got to quit selling liquor, and we got the exact same law. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
in our city, if it's 2:01, you're getting a ticket. Over there, they say, well, by 2:15. Okay. So it's, some places are more strict, some are more lenient. Uh, and so it was localized. You had your local law enforcement. You could
Mm-hmm.
go talk to them. Well, now that information goes into databases, it goes all over the place, and third parties routinely buy this information. Now, I
Okay.
don't, but they've changed some laws in various
Mm-hmm.
states, and I think federal laws, so I don't know what all they can and can't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But people that want to sell you things, or people that want to gather up information to lobby the legislature or Congress or the president for things to do or not to do,
Mm-hmm.
or to work with statistics to get police better contracts, it could be used. I use this analogy. Just my dad's a very intelligent man. He'd tell me things like, you got a little bit of fire, you can cook food and you stay warm, right? Too
Mm-hmm.
much fire, you and your house burn up. You need a little bit of water to drink. You need a little bit of water to wash your clothes.
Very good point.
But too much, you drown.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he said you need a certain amount of oxygen. You don't have enough, you die. You got too much,
Mm-hmm.
something happens to your mind. I don't know.
Hmm. That's the state of surveillance today. And, maybe this is the point at which we could approach this from a slightly different angle. For
Sure.
instance, just recently it was reported in the paper because of that CARE lawsuit, the Council on Islamic American Relations just recently sued the government because a few people, members of their association, Muslim members, had been wrongfully watch listed and were on the no-fly list and whatnot. So that case came to court, and in the process, a lot of information has come out. And one of them is that the TSC, the Terrorist Screening Center of the FBI, stated
Mhm.
that they actually provide the data on the watch list, the people's names on the watch list. These watch lists are provided to about more than 1,400 private entities. And these could be police forces at hospitals, private security services, and things like that. That's one thing that came out. And another thing that came out is that hundreds of thousands of names are added to the watch list every year. Now, this is being done through fusion centers. So how does that connect with what your own experience has been, in the police station? How are you connected to fusion centers? To what extent did the watch list come across your desk?
Well, what would be called or considered a modern fusion center?
Mm-hmm.
I've read several parts of the Patriot Act,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like a phone book, and I haven't been all the way through it. So I want to put that out there. So if I say something wrong, I apologize, and I'm ready to be corrected. I'll try and stick to what I know professionally.
Sure.
Uh, these these centers come about because of DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Okay.
Right.
Now, President George W. Bush says we got this agency over here, and they're isolated. And they got information that this agency over here really knows, but we got federal laws that said they can't talk to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I understand that, and at the time this was happening,
Mm-hmm.
they was getting every chief of police, every high-ranking law enforcement official in the country to basically tell their senators and their congressmen, we believe that we do need this, because it's trying to get grassroots from the law enforcement community to say it's safety, we need this. Well, I was sold on the idea that they need to talk to each other, because I knew people in certain government places said, if somebody's plotting a terror attack against us and this agency knows, they can't tell us by law. Said occasionally, a couple of guys that play golf together, or 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 know each other, they just happen to be somewhere and they pass information, it goes. Said
Mm-hmm.
that's always happened. It's kind of like a screen door, it don't hold the water. but said for the most part, they can't do things official. Then they got to say how they got the information, and said so it slows down justice, and it could let a lot of people attack us. So from
Mhm.
that, I said, yeah. Within about 2 years of it being operating, I started seeing a lot of strange things going on,
Mhm.
as in some of these people with DHS would come to our department or somebody else's department in order to get around. Hey, they're fishing for information on whatever. Okay. Well, what could they possibly need that for?
Mhm.
In other
Mhm.
words, it's not just me, it's several of the officers that probably between us, we had 100 years experience, and nobody could figure out there's not a legitimate reason for these questions. They know but you know because you work in the community. But
Mhm.
it's nothing that if you want to ask somebody, you can't really go out and ask those questions. And certainly if you do, that nobody's required to answer them. But you know it from living and working there. So they're using you as an octopus, one of the tentacles out here.
Mhm.
For the big brain in Washington, they're trying to reach out here and touch you. And get
Right. So did that are you from what you're saying, it sort of sounds like certain kinds of Stasi-like behavior was coming into play over here. Very intrusive questioning about certain people.
yes. And
Mhm.
and part of this is I was told that they have uh, mind experts that are psychologists, psychiatrists, and some of them are very advanced thinkers,
Hmm.
critical analysis people. And so they were saying, you need, we need to desensitize the general public into questioning that they would normally take a knee jerk and say, hey, don't be asking me that.
Hmm.
That it's just like exposing children to violent movies all the time on the TV. So now life has less value because kids have these games and TVs and internet games where they kill people, rape people, do whatever they do to them on these games.
Very
And there's no
true.
consequences. They actually get rewards and points.
Hmm.
So it mixes up fantasy and reality, and it desensitizes you. Now, me, I worked on numerous homicides, dealt with too many dead bodies to count. I don't normally, as a rule, have no bad nightmares. Occasionally, but usually not. When I first got into it, occasionally I was a lot more then when I was a very young man, and I was worried. I actually went to a psychiatrist and said, "Hey, I'm getting worried that I'm desensitized to death, and that's not a good thing." And he says, "No. In fact, after he talked to me, he says, you're actually uh, way better off and more safe than a lot of police that's going to have to deal with a life and death situation because you was exposed to several, but it was over a period of time, and you learned how to cope from one death to the next." And said, now you have better skills to deal with the family members. You have better skills to deal with the newspapers and reporting. Uh, it's just that people naturally have a protective shield. The more bad things or traumatic things, they build a thicker shield. He said, so, with some people's shields that thick, yours it might be like that.
Hmm.
He said, it's if he said, only when you say, I don't care if I go to work and there's 100 dead bodies tonight. He said, if you say that, you need to go turn in your badge or check yourself in somewhere because that's not normal. He said, but if you say, I hope there ain't no dead bodies tonight, but if there are, I'll deal with them, then you're a good policeman. That's the difference. But he said, that I was in good shape because I was afraid that was a bad thing. And I dealt with some old homicide detectives in Dallas who used to smoke these big cigars, and I'd say, why do y'all do that? To mask the smell. So the smell's really
Hmm.
horrific a lot of times.
Oh wow.
Then
Yeah.
they developed stuff that you could take and put over your thing here. In 15 minutes, it makes you nose blind. So they started using that. But the old detectives, it was kind of a
Hmm.
pass down thing, well, you've been a detective here. Here's your box of cigars. Welcome to the
Hmm.
unit. You know, you're going to see a lot of bad things. Don't let it make you callous. Don't let it turn you bad. not for a while, but at some point in time, you'll be able to eat lunch on the hood of your car while you're dealing with a dead body over here,
Mm.
because you'll build up some tolerance. Don't never
Mhm.
build up acceptance. If you just start accepting it, you need to go somewhere else. The
Mhm.
old guys that tell you it ain't normal to deal with death like this, but somebody's got to
No.
do it. And so we do. And we try and find out the people that kill them. But I digress, and I'm getting way off here. And that's
Mhm.
a bad habit of mine.
Mhm.
Okay.
I
I
think
admit
you
it.
were illustrating desensitizing in a very physical way, but you were also talking about desensitizing in a kind of a psychological way as well.
Yes, yes. So they were trying to get the public used to, uh, say, as a woman, uh, if I if I asked you how old you was, you might would go, "What?" But if you've been asked for by several police how old you are, it's like, I guess that's a normal thing. They're all doing it. It's not normal.
Oh,
They're
I
trying to
see.
create a
To
new
get
normal.
people used to, for instance, police presence on the roadways or things like that.
Yes, it is uh, to get you desensitized and to normalize it.
To
Okay,
normalize it. So, what exactly were they trying to normalize?
that police could ask lots of questions that you never heard before. You wouldn't think a cop would ask.
I,
Under the auspices, this is public safety, and if you don't answer our questions, we're going to charge you with obstructing an investigation.
I see.
Uh, we think that some of your family members involved in this, and we're going to put them in jail too. See, strong arm tactics,
Yes. Yeah.
and you know, because when Homeland Security come across, then anybody could all
Mm.
of a sudden be labeled, red flagged as a threat to national security.
Correct. And that's what I'd really like to talk about. I mean, is that still the case? How long has that persisted? What kind of pushback has there been in police departments, or has there been any? You know, are police protecting communities, or are they falling in with this plan from DHS to red flag everybody?
Well, I think that back in the very late early 90s, just prior to the Bill Clinton administration, Slick Willie, I would say that we were still in the 85, 90% category of being peace officers. You know,
Okay.
10% might have been extra good or bad or something, but I say 90% was good, and 90% of the officers at them departments were good.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody always had one or two bad eggs. You just
Mm-hmm.
statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But
Sure. Now, when you've mentioned bad eggs before, so I have to ask you this question. Now, many people say there's also not just bad eggs in police departments, there's also a kind of a subterranean underground network, like a Freemason network or a Masonic network, something like that. Has that ever come across your experience?
the closest thing to that, so the answer is yes and no both. The closest gray area is that you could have a lot of police belong to like the fraternal order of police. Okay. So fraternal
Okay.
order of police is they got things that they call like a state lodge and local lodges. And then they got federal lodges and stuff. So I don't belong to that, so I can't tell you what their rituals are or all their requirements. I've been asked a few times to join, and other officers spoke very highly of them. Some said they're dang near a cult. So I've heard
Mhm.
it both ways. So I
I
didn't know what to
see.
believe,
I see.
but I said it don't sound like something I need to be a member of, at least not now. And I'd been invited a few times to join at different lodges, and I said, I just and I said, so what are y'all doing? Well, we help with some charities and we do this, that, and the other. And okay, I said, we're just a brotherhood of peace officers. And someone said, we're a brotherhood of law enforcement officers. And I said, I liked it better when it's peace officers. I felt
Yeah.
safer. But anyway, so there would be people that might be from numerous different agencies within maybe 100-mile radius,
Mm-hmm.
that there might be one lodge in this particular county and there might not be none in two or three or four counties. So when they come to this one. So you get everything from somebody that's going to the police academy
Mm-hmm.
I suppose, and I don't know if you actually had to be full-time sworn or have a year in, but
Mm-hmm.
the new people to the very oldest at every rank
Mm-hmm.
uh, would show up and they would chit chat and talk shop. So what all they shared, did, and collaborated on, I have no firsthand experience. I've heard of some things, but
Mm-hmm.
I've also heard of some officers going to the same church or same synagogue or same mosque.
But
That
it didn't play out in a certain way such that they had greater power in the police department.
well, unions, especially if you belong to a police department, you could belong to a union or not.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe you was not a good team player the way most officers seen it. Then they might help you out the door one way or another. And they all belong to this union. So one, you're not helping the next year or this year, whenever the contract negotiations go on, that you're talking against it or you don't believe it or they're wielding too much power. All these bad things are happening. So the point is that it's happened, and they basically got it to where they were 90 to 100% union somewhere, and the union would protect them even when they were bad cops. Now, see, sometimes the unions have done very great things, and other times they did really bad things. For example, I just did an interview with somebody today
Mm-hmm.
about a troll on the internet that did this really nasty video on me and made me look like a liar or a fraud or something for something that happened in 93.
Hmm.
Okay. And uh, I had to explain the backstory. I had to explain the cast of characters. If if somebody told me this about somebody and they actually had the report and I looked at it, I say, that must be a dirty cop from hell. Okay.
Hmm.
But if somebody dissected and said, well, this is the chief of police's backstory, here's the suspect's backstory, here's the highway patrol's backstory, here's this deputy's, here's all these situations that surround it, and
Mm-hmm.
here's the bigger area, then they say, all of a sudden they say, my God, that cop was a victim, you know,
Mm-hmm.
versus versus the bad guy. Um,
Right.
so so I'm saying that things like this happen. And in fact, some police that I knew back then have seen it. And they told me, they said, man, you was one of the best peace officers God ever put on the green earth. You gave people benefit of the doubt. You took children home versus putting them in juvenile. Even when someone was 18 or 19, they still lived at home and they were in high school or college. They just was a year or two behind, or they was in college.
Mm-hmm.
And you went and talked to their mamas and daddies, grandpas, grandmas, aunts, uncles, whoever, and said, listen, yeah, I can start them a record. And especially if they were 18, they're adults, they could be 6 months or a year in the county jail, and this might stop them from their career. Can I count on you to talk with your family member? And I said, I don't mean go in there and try and fight with them. I mean, go sit down on the couch, talk to them, give them some support, give them some help, because if I find them dirty again, I'm not going to have a choice. And they said, this was the kind of guy you was. You did write tickets, but you didn't write many. You just really didn't believe in that. You believed in talking to people and say, hey, could you slow down? Will you let me help you slow down?
Mm-hmm.
You had the reputation, you'd call people on the phone and say, hey, you got a warrant, you need to turn yourself in. Well, Mr. Jones, I don't get paid till Thursday and it's Tuesday. Can I turn myself in about 4 o'clock when I get paid and get my bondsman? Yeah, that'll be fine. I call the county or the judge's office, say, hey, I talked to him, I'm going to get him to turn myself in. The first 6 months I was doing that, they'd tell me you're an idiot and now you're going to have to chase them. You should have got them while you could. But after about 6 months of the judge and the clerk and the sheriff, people said, you're a real unique individual, Jones. Nobody calls people and they turn themselves in for warrants, at least not around here. I said, well, I've heard of it, but I've never met nobody till I looked in the mirror. But I was community policing. I was
Yeah.
hardcore in it from the day I put on a uniform.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to find the good in people, tried to find a way to work. And I said, look, if you're a dirty bird like the military says, a doo-doo bird,
Mm-hmm.
and you do wrong today, it's in your nature, you'll do it again. If you're
Mm-hmm.
a human being and you made a mistake today, and I help you to correct the error and fix it, I won't never see you no more except waving to me, hey, this is just you.
Mm-hmm.
Said you make so many friends, your clearance rate for homicides, rapes, home burglaries, all these bad things, you're in the high 80s, and in some months you get 100% clearance. And said that's unheard of. Nobody does that.
Mm-hmm.
Some cops got jealous and created problems for me, but the good cops always took up for me, you know.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good thing.
And I was a good old boy in the sense of uh, I treat everybody like they was my brother, sister, cousin, mother, and uncle. I have people that's in the Congress of the United States. I
Mm-hmm.
have people in state legislatures that know me from back in them days,
Mm-hmm.
and I could pick up the phone and call any one of them today and get anything I need per se. But that's a trust and that's an earned privilege, and I don't abuse it.
Right. And I would imagine that most people would like to think of police in just that way, but things have changed in this country over time, just as you stated, with the DHS coming in and making policing sort of a hardcore enterprise. So,
Well, let
what
me
do you,
let me tell
how,
you this.
mhm,
On September the 10th, 2001, the day before
the day
hijack,
before
the
last?
hijackers drove into their airplanes into the tires. Okay, the day before that, I was at Tallahassee Regional Airport. Okay,
Hmm.
looked like airports had looked my entire life. Okay, 9/11 happened, and by that evening, I had reason to have to go there, and I don't know if I was taking somebody to the airport, pick somebody up, check. I don't remember why I was there, but I was there.
Hmm.
They had about 6 or 8 Tallahassee police cars there. They had 2 or 3 deputy sheriff cars there. They had the United States Army, not National Guard, Army, regular
Hmm.
duty Army jeeps out there. They had a tank out there. They
Hmm.
had people with fully automatic weapons, some of them this way on their shoulder, some of them down here, walking through the airport. There was at least 50 soldiers armed to the teeth walking the airport.
Hmm.
And some people, a few people said, "Oh, I'm scared with all these people in uniforms and all these guns around here." I heard a few, but
Of
but
course.
even then, most people would say, "Well, I feel much safer with them, and it's better." Guess what? Sometimes there's manufactured events,
Hmm.
and sometimes they're not manufactured; they're just allowed to happen. People tell me all the time, 9/11 was a setup. I say, based on everything I've seen, and I've talked to cagoodles of people,
Hmm.
I said, I just left my mind open. I wasn't going to take a stance. I left it open. I said,
Hmm.
at the very end, my final conclusion is it was not set up, but the deep state, the shadow state, allowed things to unfold.
I see.
In other words, we're not going to pick up the phone and say, hey, this is fixing to happen. We know it's going to happen, but we're going to allow it to happen because people would rather have fake security and safety
Hmm.
than maybe worry about a terrorist.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so now we can do things that we've never done in America. We're going to get to change America forever.
Hmm.
Now people will be used to seeing police in war gear, which it first started off in police. I was told this: hey,
Hmm.
we're going to get your department military vests, or not military vests, but bulletproof vests. I said, I've been in police work my entire life and I've never had a vest. This will be the very first one I've ever had in my life. Okay.
Hmm.
I said, I've helped people collect the other cities for collecting, but I've never actually had one.
Hmm.
Individual officers, some have bought theirs, and I probably should buy one, but I never did. I just believe God had my back. But the long story short is,
Hmm.
uh, they said if you buy them, you're going to have to buy them to match your uniform, where they do not stick out. It looks dressy, and they showed some illustrations where would go over your head and down, and it
Hmm.
cover the sides for the most part, and it would come up to about here. and it had, trauma plate and stuff, but it had to have regular pockets like a
Mhm.
regular shirt, even though you weren't it on the outside. And it had to have a place for you to wear your name tag, your
Uh-huh.
patches, and everything, where you didn't look buffed up. You didn't look like you was a knight in medieval times. Okay,
Mhm.
your equipment on your belt. There may be some other things that you may need that we may have, dazzlers and drop bombs and things that you can wear on your belt. And there's probably 100 different names for them, but uh, they're like a percussion grenade or something. There's various things you can carry, but you're going to have to carry it in a pouch that's
Mhm.
very similar. So people's going to think, well, it's another handcuff case or something. We don't want to draw attention to what's on your duty belt. We want you to look like Adam 12. You know, you're just
Mhm.
you're just good guys out there doing your job. But about that same time, they said, but we're also going to start putting in state radios where you can talk to any police in the entire state. Okay, great, but my need to talk to anybody in another county happens 2 or 3 times in a year. You know, why are we going to spend $4,000 for a special radio when I can get it for $400 and do everything we need to? Well, the
Mhm.
government's going to give it to us.
Mhm. Well, all of that sort of sounds like something was being set up, something was being put into place on a nationwide level,
Oh yeah, it's well
right?
orchestrated.
It's well
Well,
orchestrated.
yes. So I was telling people by the late 90s, I said, we have a permanent government in place.
Mhm.
And they said, what do you mean we elect people? I said, yeah, but they're yearlings. They're do boys and do girls get a position being a janitor, if nothing else. But over the course of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 6 years, then they become a clerk. And then they become an advisor. And then if you don't get reelection, then they transfer you off to the State Department. So you go to the State Department, or they transfer you off to DOD, or they transfer you off to military intelligence. And so you move around, and if you're a problem child, so that you don't go out there and blab, they keep paying you a paycheck and keep doing your benefits. They just send you to another division, and they just keep moving you around like a deck of cards.
I
But
see.
but but the point is, you're there, and in 20 years, and in 30 years, and 40 years, you're going to be there. There's people that work for the federal government that have been around there since the very late 50s. I know.
Oh, absolutely. They just get in and you stay in the government for life, right? And that's
Right. So there are some of them people that I don't think they get the salary of the president, but they're super, super high paid people.
mhm.
And they get all kind of perks and benefits that you couldn't imagine. But
Mhm.
they're the ones that come up with a screwy DHR memorandum. Like they'll say, well, if a woman's within so many foot of this fence or doing this and it appears she's pregnant, okay, well, a lot of women could appear to be pregnant and they're not. That they got to do da 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 da. And it's some 75-year-old man that ain't a woman. He don't know what that do. Nobody researched it. Nobody checked it. Nobody used any critical analysis. He just thought it's a good idea, and he writes policies. You know, so you get a
Mhm.
lot of these bizarre, crazy, illogical situations.
Mhm.
But then there's other people that are the critical thinkers, and they figure out how to twist it into something that sounds normal when it's not.